What if I told you that one of the most beloved saints of the 20th century was not a gentle, distant figure in stained glass, but a spiritual warrior who engaged in brutal physical combat with demonic forces every single night? You've been led to believe that the battle between good and evil is a metaphor, a story for children. That lie is the enemy's greatest victory. For Saint Pio of Pietrelcina, this war was terrifyingly real. He bore the wounds of Christ on his body for 50 years, wounds that bled daily and baffled the medical community. But those wounds were only the outward sign of a much deeper, more violent conflict. And to survive it, he wielded a weapon so powerful, so fundamental to our faith, that the modern world has tried to make you forget it even exists. Today, we will uncover the story of the saint who fought demons, and we will reveal the so-called forbidden weapon he used to win. Understanding this is not just a history lesson. It could be the key to winning the invisible battles in your own life. Long before the world knew him as Padre Pio, he was Francesco Forgione, a quiet, deeply devout boy from a small town in southern Italy. From his earliest years, Francesco's life was anything but ordinary. He saw things. He saw his guardian angel as clearly as he saw his own mother. He spoke with Jesus and the Virgin Mary in visions that were as real to him as the world around him. To the boy, this was normal. He assumed everyone had these experiences. This profound connection to the divine, however, cast a long shadow. From that same early age, he was also tormented by demonic figures, beings of pure malice that he called Cossacci, or ugly things. His family often found him hiding, bruised and terrified, from battles no one else could see. This was the paradox of his childhood. Heavenly consolations and hellish assaults existing side by side. His piety was so intense that at the age of 15, he joined the Capuchin friars, taking the name Pio. But as his commitment to God deepened, something else happened. His health began to collapse in mysterious ways. He suffered from excruciating illnesses that doctors could not diagnose, fevers so high they would break thermometers. It seemed as if his body was at war with itself. But what if this physical suffering was not the disease? What if it was merely the symptom of a far greater, spiritual conflict that was just beginning to manifest? The physical torment of his early years was only a prelude. On September 20th, 1918, while praying in the friary's chapel, Padre Pio received the stigmata, the 5 sacred wounds of Christ's crucifixion, imprinted on his hands, feet, and side. This was not a symbolic event. These were real, open, bleeding wounds that would remain with him for the next 50 years, until his death. The news spread like wildfire. Doctors, scientists, and skeptics descended upon the small friary of San Giovanni Rotondo to examine him. They could find no medical explanation. The wounds never became infected, never healed, and emitted a sweet floral fragrance that became known as the odor of sanctity. This supernatural phenomenon turned Padre Pio into one of the most famous and controversial figures in the Catholic Church. The stigmata was a visible sign of his complete union with the suffering of Christ. It was a divine seal. But think of the consequence of this. If you are marked so publicly as a soldier of God, you also become the #1 target for his enemy. The visible wounds were a testament to his holiness, but they were also a magnet for the forces of darkness, initiating a new, more violent phase of his spiritual warfare. Now the demons were no longer just terrifying visions. Their attacks would become brutally physical. For decades, Padre Pio's small, sparse room, cell number 5, became a nightly battlefield. His fellow friars would hear terrible sounds coming from his cell, crashing, screaming, and the sickening thud of blows. They would find him in the morning, exhausted, covered in bruises, his face swollen and bleeding from injuries that could not have been self-inflicted. The devil and his minions appeared to him in horrifying forms, sometimes as monstrous animals, other times masquerading as his superiors, or even as Jesus or Mary, in a twisted attempt to deceive him. They beat him with chains, tempted him with blasphemous suggestions, and sought to break his spirit through sheer terror and pain. He described these encounters in his letters to his spiritual directors. He wrote of being soundly beaten, of the enemy throwing him out of bed, and of a hellish uproar that lasted for hours. Why this intense physical hatred? Because Padre Pio was becoming one of the greatest spiritual threats to evil in the 20th century. From his confessional, he was reading souls, revealing hidden sins, and bringing countless people back to God. Every soul he saved was a soul snatched from the grasp of the enemy. The nightly beatings were not random acts of cruelty. They were a desperate, furious attempt to stop his ministry, but they failed. Every morning, though battered and exhausted, Padre Pio would make his way to the altar, because he knew that the true battle was not won in his cell at night, but in the chapel every morning. This raises the most important question. What gave him the strength to endure this? He was not a superhero. He was a frail man in constant pain. He had to be drawing power from a source beyond himself. He was using a divine weapon. The world loves secrets, but Padre Pio's weapon was not a secret at all. It was, and is, an arsenal hidden in plain sight. A spiritual treasure that the modern secular world deems foolish, outdated, or powerless. And that is precisely why it has become, in a sense, forbidden by our culture. His first line of defense was the rosary. He called it simply the weapon. His hands were never without it. He prayed dozens of rosaries each day. For Padre Pio, this was not a repetitive, mindless prayer. It was a spiritual sword. Each Hail Mary was a blow against darkness, a declaration of loyalty to the Queen of Heaven, whom the demons fear above all. By meditating on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, he was immersing himself in the very power that conquered sin and death. He was reminding himself and the forces of hell of who had already won the ultimate war. But the rosary, as powerful as it was only his sidearm. His primary weapon, the source of all his strength, was the Holy Mass. When Padre Pio celebrated Mass, time seemed to stand still. His Masses could last for hours, because for him, it was not a ritual. He was truly at Calvary. He wept for Christ's suffering. He trembled with reverence before the Eucharist, and he united his own immense pain with the sacrifice on the altar. It was there, at the foot of the cross made present, that he drew the infinite grace and divine power needed to survive the nightly assaults and to continue his work. This is the truth the world wants you to forget, that a simple string of beads in the hands of a faithful soul and the humble offering of bread and wine at the altar contain more power than all the forces of hell combined. The life of Saint Pio is a dramatic and uncomfortable reminder that we are part of a spiritual reality far greater than what our eyes can see. Perhaps your battles are not with visible demons in the dead of night. Perhaps your battles are with despair, with addiction, with doubt, with the quiet temptations that seek to pull you away from God. These struggles are no less real, and they are no less serious. Padre Pio's legacy is not just a story of supernatural phenomena. It is a roadmap for spiritual victory. He shows us that the weapons given to us by the Church are not relics of a bygone era. They are living, powerful conduits of God's grace, available to every single one of us right now. The Rosary is not just a Catholic accessory. It is a chain to hold on to Our Lady in the midst of the storm. The Holy Mass is not just a Sunday obligation. It is our direct participation in the single most powerful event in human history. The forbidden weapon of Padre Pio was simply his absolute, unwavering faith in the power of Christ and his Church. He teaches us that we should never underestimate the power of our prayers, and that in the Eucharist, we have access to a strength that can overcome any darkness. Your battle is real, but so is your weapon. Pick it up,